Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Inshallah, today we will be continuing from the 25th word. We're on the first ray of the first light and about to enter the fourth point of it. I will also just share the link here. So right before the fourth point, however, there was just one or two sentences that we didn't read. I don't think we need to discuss them, but I will just read them quickly. So this was part of the last part of the third point. And it said, "It is because the Quran style is for the greater part elevated and brilliant in the ways described above, that on occasion Arab nomads were captivated by a single phrase, and without being Muslims would prostrate. One nomad prostrated on hearing the phrase, 'Therefore proclaim openly what you are commanded.'" And this is from chapter 15, verse 94. One asked, "Have you become Muslim?" He replied, "No, I am prostrating at the eloquence of these words." And that was the end of the third point. And the third point gave numerous examples, so I don't think we need to necessarily discuss this, but it's saying even to that extent where someone who was not going to consciously accept that the Quran was or is the word of God or become, Muslim, they still felt the need to prostrate at the impact, the eloquence of such words. Now, as a recap, again, we've been discussing the miraculousness of the Quran, and we've been going over 5 points regarding this wisdom as demonstrated in the eloquence of the Quran. And the first point, just extremely briefly, the first point stressed the significance of word order and how this eloquence is manifested in the word order of the Quran. The second point was about how the eloquence is expressed through the meaning, the power, the elevated manner of expression of the verses. And the third point to last week, and I think the week before that we've been discussing, was about the style of the Quran, how that indicates very explicitly the eloquence. And, of course, in addition to this, for example, last week we spoke about how the Quran speaks to me for my needs, right? I have to bring my needs to the table in order to engage with the verses in a fruitful way. I can't separate the situation, the reality that I face, that I am part of. I can't separate or isolate that from my interaction with the Quran and my experiences in the universe. All of this, it has to be very holistic. All of this has to come together in order for me to benefit from the Quran as a human being, as someone who has questions, as someone who has problems, and as someone who's trying to resolve them, who's trying to seek guidance on how to resolve them, in our every day-to-day life. Now, today, inshallah, we'll be reading the fourth point. It's also quite, not comparatively, but it's also long, so I'm not going to read all of it. Well, it's 2 pages, but still, I'll just perhaps read the first 2 paragraphs or whatnot, and we can just go over it slowly and see what it tells us and what we can extract from it for our own lives. Okay, so the fourth point. The fourth point is about the wonderful eloquence in its wording, in the Quran's wording. That is, in the words employed. Yes, just as the Quran is extraordinarily eloquent in regard to its style and manner of exposition, so is there a truly fluent eloquence in its wording. Clear evidence of the existence of this eloquence is the fact that it does not bore or cause weariness, while the testimony of the brilliant scholars of the sciences of rhetoric forms a decisive proof of the wisdom of the eloquence. So this fourth point is about the word choice, the eloquence of the word choice, the choice of which words are to be used, to be employed, in bringing the meaning that it does bring to us. So just as, these last few points have talked about the eloquence in regard to the style and manner of exposition, so too is the word choice, the wording, a clear demonstration of the same Quranic eloquence. It says clear evidence of the existence of this eloquence is the fact that it does not bore or cause weariness, and we'll discuss that further. While the testimony of the brilliant scholars of the science of rhetoric forms a decisive proof of the wisdom of the eloquence. So from here, I can take two parts, right? One is that you can kind of witness this eloquence yourself when you read the Quran, when you recite it, when you interact with it. And also, those who are experts, those who have studied the science of language, the science of rhetoric, also are unanimous that there's extreme wisdom, that there is extreme eloquence present. And so he continues, and I'll be reading and quickly summarizing as I go, but needless to say, you can interrupt me if you have any comments or objections at any point. Yes, it does not weary, even if repeated thousands of times. So the Quran does not tire you, even if it's repeated thousands of times. Indeed, it gives pleasure. It is not burdensome for the memory of a small and simple child. Children can memorize it easily. It is not unpleasant to the ear, pained by the slightest word of someone extremely ill. It is easy on it. It is like sharbet, or just, sweet juice to the palate of one in the throes of death. The recitation of the Quran gives sweet mouth and palate. I'm not sure how to pronounce that actually. The reason for its not causing boredom and the wisdom of it is this. It is food and sustenance for the heart, strength and wealth for the mind, water and light for the spirit, and the cure and remedy for the soul. Every day we eat bread, yet we do not tire of it. But if we were to eat the choicest fruit every day, it would cause boredom. That means it is because the Quran is truth and reality and truthfulness and guidance and wonderfully eloquent that it does not cause weariness and preserves its freshness and agreeableness as though preserving a perpetual youth. One of the Qurayshi leaders, even an expert orator, was sent by the idolaters to listen to the Quran. He went and listened, then returned and said to them, so this expert orator, this Qurayshi leader, he said, "These words have such a sweetness and freshness that they do not resemble the words of men. I know the poets and soothsayers, these words do not resemble theirs. The best we can do is mislead our followers and say it is magic." The best we can do is mislead our followers and say it is magic. Thus, even the all-wise Quran's most obdurate enemies were amazed at its eloquence. Let me pause here for a moment. So here it's telling us primarily that the eloquence of word choice in the Quran is demonstrated because one does not get bored or tired of reciting it, listening to it, that it's not unpleasant to the ear. In fact, it's the opposite of that. It's pleasure to the ear. And he recounts here 4 ways in which it kind of fulfills needs, I guess. He says it's food and sustenance for the heart, strength and wealth to the mind, water and light for the spirit, cure and remedy for the soul. So this made me think, especially when it started by saying, it is not burdensome for the memory of a small and simple child. And I was thinking, well, I mean, a lot of things are not burdensome for the memory of a small and simple child. Children just kind of digest everything, just soak it up so easily. They memorize songs, they memorize phrases. You say one thing, next thing you know, they say that again like a week later. They're just there to kind of soak things up. And it also made me think, however, that, if a child, let's say, has a toy, and this toy, when you press one of its buttons, always sings a song, it's perhaps pleasant to the ear of that child, but it's definitely not pleasant to yours. Or maybe it is pleasant to yours as well. But after a while, after the 50th time, let's say, or even the 5th time, it gets really unpleasant. You just want to, I don't know, destroy that toy. You don't want to hear it anymore because you've heard it so many times. And so in this sense, even if it, was pleasant, it loses that effect, that impact, by virtue of kind of tiring you out. And I guess another point that comes to mind is, even if something is pleasurable to the ear, it's not always food and sustenance for the heart. Or even if it, kind of, I guess, alleviates some of the burdens on your spirit, it may not exactly be strength and wealth for the mind. There's always some sort of trade-off, I guess. It's hard to find something that, both cures your soul and also brings strength to your mind. And so I guess here he's highlighting, the text is highlighting that in so many different ways, in a very comprehensive fashion, like the faculty of our heart, the faculty of our reasoning and thought, the faculty of our spirit and our soul, all of these different faculties that comprise us are nourished, are fulfilled, are take pleasure in it in some way. And I mean, at least for myself, it's true that the recitation of the Quran doesn't really give off any sort of, shut it off. I'm tired of listening to it. I mean, maybe there are some people, I don't know, but at least for myself, and this isn't even from the perspective of like, oh, this is something sacred and holy, we have to give it respect. No, it's just like purely the sound of it is something that's very amiable to the ear. So it's saying it does not wear even if repeated thousands of times. So I guess, and he gives examples from the physical state, if we maybe Sally loves pomegranates and Sally would love to eat them every single day. But after a while, if you're eating pomegranates every single day, the taste of it will tire you out. After a while, it'll be too acidic or too sour or too crunchy. Even if this was like ice cream or something, even if you love strawberry ice cream, you don't want to eat strawberry ice cream every single day. Our body tires of repetitiveness as well, repetition. But here it's saying that it preserves its freshness and agreeableness as though preserving a perpetual youth. So there's something here that's telling me that the Quran is not something that decays, that lessens somehow an impact or value over time, which is, pretty much of the nature of every other thing that I interact with. There's something, I guess, out of the ordinary about it, something that goes beyond my usual expectation when I interact with things in the world. And I guess this is it's eloquence. It's eloquence, and that eloquence in turn is in part miraculous for this reason. So those are some thoughts that I had so far. And then, of course, towards the end of the paragraph, he brings in, I guess, a narration of like a historical record of someone who wasn't even a proponent of it, but could also verify that it was something not producible by the mind or the writing of humans. And what is magic, right? He's saying the best we can do is mislead our followers and say it's magic. What is magic? Magic is that which is out of the ordinary, that which is not of the, if you will, order of the universe either. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments for a moment so I can catch my breath? If not, we can continue reading as well. Okay, we have a hand up. Brother Rikam, please go ahead.
Jazakallah khairan for the introduction and reading and all the comments. So that's really interesting piece of text. Just like the rest of this 25th word. Like you already touched upon many aspects. I just like to repeat a few of them, maybe highlight. One thing, it's to me, it's really interesting that the fact that even the children can memorize it easily, although I cannot. But anyway, like it's not just a few paragraphs or a few pages. It's 600 pages. So it is something, right? When an actor or actress memorize a passage from, let's say, Shakespeare, we are amazed. We say, "Wow, look at this." But these people are memorizing 600 pages. So I think, at least to me, it shows that there must be something with the language used, the flow of the narration, flow of the language must be so, as author says, sweet and easy to articulate. It gives a taste, a beautiful taste to your tongue, so that people would memorize it and recite it with pleasure. This is one part. This is only one part which author mentions, and I thought, since he also mentions it, words to highlight. I usually, do not think about these stylistic or style-related aspects much. But since this is part of the text that we are reading, I thought maybe I should think about it a little bit. And as I start thinking about it, it is, at least to me, something really amazing in its true sense. Another thing, this part, the example the author gives about the bread and fruit. Every day we eat bread, yet we do not tire of it. So eating bread is not probably common in the culture of America, the US culture. But in the culture that this text is written, bread is so fundamental, so a centerpiece of every meal. You eat bread with breakfast. It's the main, actually, course of the breakfast. You eat the bread with lunch, again, the main course of the lunch, and then with the dinner. It's everywhere. And we eat it a lot. I guess another example here would be maybe drinking water. You drink water, it does not bore you. Even though, you drink some other stuff from time to time, you may, for instance, drink soda, but after a while, like if you drink it too much, you will say, I drank too much. I feel awkward, or I don't want to drink it for a while, you would say. But with water, it's not that way. So, and then he says the same way, let me see, it would go to board. That means it is because the Quran is truth and reality and truthfulness and guidance and wonderfully eloquent, that it does not cause weariness and preserves its freshness and agreeableness and so on and so forth. So it shows that the Quran, what we read in Quran, not only from a linguistic perspective, but also what we get out of the Quran, what we understand from the Quran, is something we need fundamentally, just like water or just like bread. Like with bread example, you can think it as nutrition, right? Nutrition is something that you need as a human being. It's not a choice, it's not optional. The water is not optional. The same way, Quran must be giving us something that is not optional, that no matter how much we read it, no matter how much we discuss it, no matter how much we study it, try to understand it, it will not cause boredom. Just like every time I drink water, I feel something new. There's always a freshness in the experience of drinking water. I do not say, like I don't remember any moment of myself drinking water and saying that, oh yeah, this is the exact same feeling that I had yesterday, or even like a half an hour ago when I was drinking water. Because at that time, for instance, the first time I drank water today, it was probably out of custom. Like I woke up and then I said, okay, every time I woke up, I drink water, I drank water, I get pleasure. But then in the second moment, I was in a different context. I drank water because I was so thirsty. Let's say I ate a lot of dessert or something salty. And then in third moment, another moment, I drank water to calm myself, let's say. Every time I drink water, I am a different person with different needs, with different the ideas in different contexts. Therefore, every time I drink water, it quenches my thirst in a different way. The same thing, the author says, Quran, it is food and sustenance for the heart, strength and wealth for the mind, water and light for the spirit, and the cure and remedy for the soul. Every time I read it, it remedies another, a problem in my soul. Every time I read Quran, every time I try to understand Quran, it provides another kind of strength to my mind. Because every time I'm changing, my surrounding is changing, my needs, my desires are changing. So the Quran, whatever inside it, it must be quenching a different desire, my different need every time, so that I do not get bored when I read Quran. So this example, this analogy with bread or water, I think it's so powerful, so eloquent. Just like, we studying the eloquence of Quran, and while doing so, the example that author gives, I think it's so eloquent that explains things in a very nice way. Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those thoughts with us. Just a few, I guess, thoughts before I move on. But yeah, I think in terms of the memorization point, I had heard about like this one person who had like memorized apparently the entirety of another scripture, and it said that like it took him like 35 thousand hours or so, which is like 4 years nonstop. And sure, there can be exceptions in that, sometimes we see people who memorize like these long hundreds of pages. But it is, I think, to be conceded that there is something different going on here, because you see, like, I don't know, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of people memorizing the same text every single year. So I just wanted to share that, I guess. And I guess just another point was, in terms of the Quran not tiring me out or not becoming worrisome. I mean, like I was thinking, well, the Quran's not exactly a page turner for me. If there's books I like to read that like I don't get tired of, it's usually because, oh, it's kind of exciting and I want to know what happens next, and the writing is lucid and clear. But I mean, at least when I'm reading translations of the Quran, this is not necessarily the case. Sometimes I do get tired of just trying to understand or make sense of certain stories or otherwise. However, then the question arises of, is it, as Sohail asked, is he presupposing one understands what the Quran means, in that if I don't know Arabic, does his contentions hold true? Sohail, do you want to say a little bit more on that, and maybe we can open that question up to others who may want to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with his, idea that it's easy to memorize the Quran, as Birkan said, and as you said, primarily because, I think I read somewhere that the Quranic vocabulary is at the level of maybe somebody with like fifth or sixth grade education. The vocabulary is rather simple, and the use of vocabulary, the same roots used in so many different ways that, once you know the roots, you can easily, I guess it's also because of the nature of the Arabic language, you can easily memorize the Quran, unlike English, um, where there is no, unlike any, since it's not a Semitic language, there's no root structure. So I guess simplicity and, the rhythmic nature of the Quran, as he points out, the repetition in the Quran also. And I guess if you understand what it means, it makes it rather easy to memorize over just a couple of years, or sometimes even less. But the one thing is, I'm never really sure about is, what you mentioned. Are you inclined to listen to it for a prolonged period of time? Like if you don't know what it means, or does it just become background noise? Like I walked into, you know, like let's say a Middle Eastern store, and I'm sure everyone has, and they'll be, or it doesn't have to be Middle Eastern, maybe it's non-Middle Eastern, but somebody who would like identifies as being Muslim, they'll be playing the Quran in the background on the TV or something, or over the speaker as like quote unquote background music. So is it being played because of cultural significance, or does somebody actually find it pleasant to listen to if they don't know what it means, or are they listening to it because they understand what it means and it resonates with them? Like I'm never really so sure about this contention that it's pleasant to listen to if you don't know what it means, like for prolonged period of times. I'll say this: I think it's pleasant to listen to if you understand what it means and you're open to what it has to say. That I'm certain of, because it resonates like at a human level. But I mean, it's kind of, I always think about some experiment in my mind where if you were to play the Quran or play a recitation of the Quran to somebody, and then let's say play like some classical Arabic poetry, or some classical Arabic song, would they be able to tell the difference to somebody who doesn't know Arabic, or which is the vast majority, I mean, myself included? And so, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not really. Maybe somebody has a convincing, reason or argument, but the pleasure or sweetness to listen to me, at least personally, stems from understanding what it means. Otherwise, it to some extent to me signifies some sort of cultural significance. And I'm sure, I mean, Nursi obviously knew Arabic. He knew what the Quran meant. But so that's just kind of how I feel about it. But
Yeah, thank you, Brother Suhail. Yeah, I think those are good points. I mean, in my personal experience, obviously I can't, uh, pretend to just kind of extract the cultural influences that may be present in for example, the example I'm about to give. But, I had, there are certain mothers who will play the Quran, or fathers, parents who will play the Quran as lullabies for their children. I've had roommates in college who would open up the Quran to listen to while they were going to sleep for the purpose of just, I don't know, that ease it gave. And this wasn't necessarily, I mean, babies, I don't know how much the meaning they understood. And for the, roommate scenario, again, it wasn't necessarily for the meaning. I think for sure, there's a particular sweetness when that meaning opens up. But I think, at least again, to the extent of, even my personal experiences, there's still a sweetness that's present in just its recitation. Even if one does not exactly understand what's going on. And of course, like if you go on YouTube, or if you're in any number one of, WhatsApp chats with aunties in them, you'll find videos every now and then of, oh, look at this video in which this non-Muslim listened to the Quran for the first time and look at their reaction. And, these reactions will sometimes be of people like being deeply emotionally affected or crying. And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if the answer to that question is super important, honestly. Insofar as I'm concerned, I have to see what impact it has on me. If it impacts my heart or my mind or my spirit and my soul the way it does. But yeah, I mean, these are interesting topics, I guess. We also have another hand up here by Brother Abdulaziz. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me okay?
Walaikum salam, yes.
Okay. So I have some experience in memorizing actually the whole book of Quran. And I want to say that basically it was not easy. I mean, I was a child. It was really difficult. I don't remember it as a fun time or as a great time, to be perfectly honest. And I think when you sit down and say that you enjoy reading it, or you don't find it tiring, it's your place to sit down and say Alhamdulillah. It's like a gift has been given to you. It's not to be taken for granted. And so yeah, I mean, I was a kid. I mean, I had no choice but to memorize it, and I did. And obviously, alhamdulillah, that happened. But I'm not gonna claim that I remember being in so much joy doing that. And the other thing, also in terms of reading it or listening to it, and I do understand Arabic. I don't. My personal experience that it's heavy. It's like a guidance, but it's like really heavy guidance. Like listening to it, for me, I just can't catch up. Basically, two sentences are in, and I'm way behind. And this actually happened, to be honest, even frequently with even Surah Al-Fatiha. It's just really, this is my own experience. It's really heavy. Like when I read it, I feel like my tongue is way ahead of my brain processing these words. Anyways, that's all I have to say about this. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much for sharing those experiences and insights. Yeah, I think it's interesting how everyone's experience kind of differs and how we learn from each other and seeing those differences. So at this point, I don't know, does anyone else want to say anything so far about either something that has been said or Brother Birkan, you can go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum again. So when I have something to eat, for instance, and if the look is not that attractive, it's not the beautiful piece of art that I'm eating, but something, I don't know, I find unpleasant. And when I see that the taste is good, actually, not that bad, there is still this resonance in my mind, like there's something unfitting there. Because I enjoy more when something looks good and tastes good. I do not enjoy when something looks good but doesn't, taste good, or tastes good but doesn't look good. When both of them come together, I enjoy most. Otherwise, I say, there's something missing there. It's not that pleasant. It's not that refreshing. It's not a let's say, a food for my mind, or it's not a strength for my mind. It's not remedy for my soul. When both aspects do not agree. And I guess we can say the same thing for many things that we experience, if not all. Like if you ask me, that is true for everything that we experience, that we interact with. There are different aspects to things, right? There is, for instance, when we talk about Quran, there is this meaning aspect of it. There is a purpose aspect of it. There is the guidance aspect of it. How it touches to my soul, how it touches to my spirit, how it feeds my mind, all these different aspects. But also there is this outwardly aspect of it as well, how it looks like, how it sounds like, how it tastes. And the way I see what author does here, he says, as a human being, I'm interacting with all these different aspects at the same time. And it is really surprising. It's not surprising, but it is really, there is something unique with Quran that he says we need to be honest to ourselves. Yet there are, other piece of art, maybe other, I don't know, poems or something, I'm not familiar, which are as good as Quran. There are some other books maybe giving some taste to your mind. But he says when you look at Quran, everything you need as a human being, your entire humanity is satisfied, he says. You can take it as a claim, of course. You can say, no, I study Quran and you know what, I disagree. It was not any pleasure to my mind, to my spirit, to my soul. And by the way, I hate how it, sounds. I guess it is possible. Like it would be, I guess, I think silly to think that, oh no, everybody on this earth agrees that when you hear Quran, you cry. When you hear Quran, you feel, refreshed. If you are denying this, you are lying. Thinking this would be, I guess, silly in its most innocent, form. The human beings are different. Human beings have different needs. Human beings have different desires. They live in different contexts. Sometimes I'm angry and I cannot see the beauty of something that my wife prepares, for instance, for me. It would be, silly for her to assume, like, no matter how Birkan feels, he will find this beautiful. I will not. But at the same time, I guess it would be unjust to what she prepares and say that there is no beauty in there just because I don't know it, I don't see it right now. It would be unjust to, to claim that, whatever author is saying here, it's just his own idea, he's probably making up. He says there is such a beauty there. Linguistic-wise, meaning-wise, guidance-wise, all these different aspects that a human being interacts and need to interact. And he says, you can again take it as a claim, if you look at it, if you study it with an open mind, if you study it with an open heart, you will see this beauty and you will be, touched with this beauty. And this is something universal, the author claims. But it doesn't mean, again, it will work every time you do it, or it will work with everyone in any circumstances, in any situation. It will not, because this is the reality, right? I think this multidimensionality of Quran, and along every dimension, it has a beauty. The fact that it has a beauty, I think it's really important because it speaks to my multidimensionality as a human being. I am a multidimensional entity. You cannot reduce me to, the linguistic aspect of a book. You cannot reduce me, but at the same time, what is being said and what is being narrated. If one part is missing, I will feel it and I will say, there's something missing there. just like eating the ugliest ever chocolate, which has the the most beautiful taste. Jazakallah khairan.
Sorry, I lost connection there for a moment. I also missed the last part of what Brother Birkan was saying. But that's my fault. I see that we have two other hands up. Brother Abdulaziz, is that a new hand?
Actually, that's an old hand, but I add a little bit.
Okay. How about
Yeah.
You can go ahead, and then Brother Sohail, you can go after him, inshallah.
Okay. Well, my first question is, how do I lower my hand? Let's start with that.
There should be a lower hand. Let me see. Wait. It's a good. Well, if you go over your own name in the participants list, there should be an extra button that says lower hand. You see it?
Sorry, I can't see it, but that's okay. Anyways, I
just the brother Abdulaziz Old Ismail. If you click the same button that you clicked for raise hand, if you are already raised your hand, it will be over your hand. So yeah.
I get it. Yeah, I clicked on it twice and disappeared. Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry. Well, what I wanted earlier to say is to recollect my thoughts. Personally, as Birkan said, because this is kind of a multidimensional thing, I find the real joy, or like I find that the dose is complete when the guidance and the beauty are gathered together. But to be honest, when the beauty is the only thing there, personally, this is just a personal thing. I kind of just zone out, or like I'm not exactly there. So just as we don't want obviously to reduce it to the guidance dimension, we also don't want to reduce it to the beauty dimension. And I think that's more common, at least in the area that I grew up in. At least that's my opinion, that it's more common to value the beauty thing. And yeah, that's the only thing I wanted to say. That the beauty on its own, I don't really feel it. And oh yeah, the other thing I wanted to say, and I think I said it in the first comment, but I want the folks in the group to remember it very well, is this is, you're given this. When you feel that way, regardless of what you feel, you've been, like, Allah has given you that, and you should appreciate it, and you should say alhamdulillah for it and not take it for granted. That's it. Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Brother Sohail?
Yeah, I guess maybe touching on what the last two said, and this, I mean, I don't know if I said this, I mean, maybe it's controversial here. If I say it outside, it's controversial, but it's almost like in medicine, you give somebody, you're comparing the efficacy or effectiveness of a drug, a new drug, let's say, versus placebo. So something that's literally nothing. It's maybe just like salt or sugar. And, people have a response to placebo because they think it's something. They're open to the idea. They've convinced themselves that it is something. Sometimes I'm not disputing the eloquence of the Quran itself, but as Abdul Aziz said, I mean, and not just where you're from. I mean, I think everywhere. To me, there's a sort of, you are convinced, or I guess you can call it being open or convinced of the eloquence of the Quran. Therefore, you see the eloquence of the Quran. If that makes sense. That's kind of how I feel about it sometimes. In that, one is certain about the beauty of the Quran because they've been made to believe or they've convinced themselves about the beauty of the Quran. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of my perception of it. Yeah, what you're saying, being convinced that the eloquence exists versus witnessing that eloquence directly. And I think there's less of the latter and more of the former. I'm not saying that's what Nursi's saying, but to me, that's kind of what holds true. Even myself in my own life, growing up, I was convinced that the Quran is the word of God because everybody else was saying it, because that's what I was told, and it had to be true. Because if everybody else said it, then the likelihood of them lying is highly unlikely. Look, and I've had a different viewpoint as I've gotten older, but I mean, I do think there's a strong element of that. Like I said, in no way does it take away from the eloquence of the Quran that it inherently has. But to me, I don't know, there's something to be said about, as Abdulaziz said, that taking both its eloquence, its linguistic eloquence, and its meaning at the same time. Like you can't separate the form from the meaning or the function. You can't separate the word from what it means. They go hand in hand. And if one is just focused on the outward, the form, are you really appreciating the true eloquence of the Quran? You have to take both hand in hand together. I guess that's an argument one could make for that one should at least try to study, the Arabic language or the Quranic Arabic language. But that's my personal opinion. Not everybody may agree. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, all of you, for sharing those really useful comments. Yeah, I mean, I think just to go back to that last point that Sohail was making about, and which I highlighted in the chat box, that there's a distinction between, thinking that yes, eloquence is a necessity and it must necessarily exist, versus witnessing that eloquence directly. I mean, even I'll be honest, this 25th was it the 25th, right? The 25th word has been so difficult for me and at times kind of tiresome for me because some parts of it are really technical. It's like, okay, I'll get some of the more simple examples perhaps of, certain parts of the Arabic phrases of the verses, but a lot of other parts of it just kind of go over my head. And honestly, I'm not too invested in it either. I am convinced that the Quran must have a particular eloquence to it that is unmatched. And part of that, conviction is based on just even hearing people, whether it says in the text or other times that, experts themselves say this. I mean, my concern is more about bringing my needs to the Quran, right? And I think Brother Birkan was highlighting this earlier, that just as I'm in a constant flux of change. And because of that, there's always going to be a freshness to the verse that I'm interacting with, because I'm a different me. My concerns are different. My needs are different. The problems in my head are different. My mood is different. So at every single time, I'm going to have a different experience. And this keeps that sort of perpetual youth to it. Now, if someone comes to me and says, hey, that is a proof of its eloquence, as perhaps Nursi here is saying, then I'll say, okay, well, maybe then I can witness the eloquence. Maybe not in all the other 199 ways, but perhaps in this way. Of course, I have to ask myself honestly, is this the case? Is it the case that each time I go to the Quran, I'm able to at least have some sort of different interaction with it that hasn't matched up with my last interaction with it, or gather something from it that is that speaks to me in a different way. I mean, I don't know. Again, reading the translation at times, it's extremely difficult for me to try and understand, and usually I'll be frustrated, but there are also times where, you know, it can be a single verse and it'll just so happen that it speaks just so happen, right? Speak to a particular state of being that I'm going through in a particular day. So I guess, you know, and as this 25th word has shown, eloquence manifests itself in so many different ways. Sometimes it's in the technicalities, sometimes it's in the style, sometimes it's in the meaning that is expressed in a very succinct and clear way, and sometimes it's in the word choice. And you know, I haven't gone up to the 5th point, but I'm sure there's another way as well. And these are just 5 of, I'm sure, many different ways of anyone who studies eloquence or rhetoric or language. So those are, you know, some thoughts I wanted to share. I guess I have to ask myself, what is at stake for me when being concerned with a particular question? What is at stake for me in terms of, I don't know, me as a human being and the problems and inquiries that I have, in terms of the relationships that I have, in terms of the problems that I have at school, at work? What's in it for me? I think I have to ask myself that question, lest I be lost in sort of these obtuse, abstract questions that don't really have any practical implications for how I'm going to live my life from then on forth. So that's some further thoughts. Again, Brother Abdulaziz, please go ahead.
So I'm not proposing any solution, but if some of you share this challenge of like having it difficult to catch up, like when reading, I don't know, because of, as you said, like we're changing, our needs change, is really the solution is to go through Mus'haf, through like or through ayat, like generally after each other, and see what resonates with us, or is it just worth spending the time and sticking to what you're reading at that very exact moment and trying to extract from it what you relate to at that specific moment? Because sometimes, like, if you're just like, I don't know if it's polite, but if you're just in the hunt, if you go through like a few pages, you definitely will find something that kind of immediately you need, like it's something that your blood needs. But I'm just curious if anyone has any suggestion about this.
I think that's such a great and important point. And it makes me think that sometimes it's both, in that, like, for example, on Mondays there's another halakha that takes place that's so far been just kind of studying chronologically the verses of the Quran and trying to understand them as they relate to our life. And the brother that leads that halakha, you know, we spend an hour and a half on one verse. And usually, you know, I'll start perhaps that day's class with making absolutely no connection with whatever that verse, I understand that verse to be saying. But usually, hopefully, you know, if I've been able to at least pay attention and really reflect on it during the gathering, I'll be able to relate it to my life and be able to extract at least one thing from it by the end of that 1 hour and a half. And that's all that really matters, even just one point. So I think, yes, sometimes it is necessary to sit and just reflect and ruminate on one verse and try to see how it speaks to you and try to be patient with it. Now, do I usually have that patience? No, I think I end up sometimes doing the latter of which you said, which is kind of just, you know, I'll go through some pages and then almost as if I'm hunting for something that speaks to me at that very moment, because I just want sort of like this immediate speech. And perhaps each of those verses that I'm going through could speak to me if I sort of let myself sit with them a bit. So I think I'm not sure if that completely answers your question. I mean, this is just my response. I'm interested in hearing what other people have to say. But yeah, I think like keeping in mind for me that when I come face to face with a verse, that act, that experience, that interaction is being intentionally created for me, and that the verse is God's speech to me here and now. Like keeping myself situated within that framework really, I guess, sometimes delivers the weight of what's going on, which is difficult at times because it just seems like this passive static text that I'm going through. But reminding myself that it's a letter, it's like this, that at that single moment it's the equivalent of just the mailman coming and shoving a letter through my door slot. I would go and read it and just be like, oh, like someone is communicating something to me right now. Approaching a verse in that same way, I think it requires practice, and I think it requires diligence and patience, and all of these things are not necessarily, I'm not saying I'm like, I've mastered them. I think I'm trying to take steps, and sometimes backward steps, but steps nevertheless. And I think that's really the most we can do at times, just take steps and hope that they, and ask them and bring ourselves to them, and see what comes from it. But again, I kind of jumped at your question because I was excited by it, but anyone else that wants to respond to that, please go ahead. Brother Suhail, thank you.
I may have understood the question incorrectly, but at least from what I understood from Abdulaziz's question, I get really fundamentally how to personalize the Quran, or personalize a verse, or personalize a chapter. I mean, Abdulaziz mentioned Surah Al-Fatiha. To me, like I would kind of let go of the idea of ever trying to completely grasp what the Quran means, because one cannot grasp, in the entirety what the Quran means. But as Aisha Noor was saying, even if one grasps one point that is beneficial, to me that is sufficient. And just like in my own life, any one chapter has had different meanings to me or different relevance to me, at different points in my life. So growing up, Surah Al-Fatiha might have meant, I mean, something very different. And I know it meant something very different because of what was, preached or spoken on the minbar, like any like Friday Jummah khutbah. So like it meant something to me maybe when I was 10 and 15, but definitely something different when I was 20 or 25, and now past 30 that means something else, and then 40 inshallah, or 50, or when you get 60, 70, I think it means something different at any point in one's life. So even though it is heavy, and I do agree with him that it is, the Quran is, like, if you really are serious about paying attention or trying to understand what it means, you realize that every, as Norsi says in many places, every mark or every letter and every word is in a particular place and has a particular significance and a particular meaning. The most you can ask for and pray for and ask God for is understanding at least some aspect of His speech that's relevant to you. And I think the Quran, if you follow, I guess, certain principles, that, I mean, we often talk about or talked about in other discussions, I think you can personalize it if you really try to sort of combat or go against the impulse to try to make it relevant to somebody else, or this concerns someone else, or this is about someone else or some other group, or this is historical. But seeing what it actually, what is the underlying message it's trying to uh, convey. And I think you can do that with any chapter, so long as you reflect on your own experience in life. And I think that goes hand in hand, because quite often, like, we try to compartmentalize, or I try to compartmentalize, oh, the Quran is here, or divine speech is here, God's word is on one side, and my life is somewhere else. So, and the two are not connected, or maybe loosely connected. Whereas if you kind of see your life as being spoken to and spoken about through the Quran, then it sort of takes on a very different dimension. And I think that's the importance, is that really being serious or self-critical and self-reflective, rather than just living life, but reflecting on your experience in life, and really being aware and cognizant of what's happening moment to moment, day to day, then I think the Quran then becomes much more alive, much more relevant.
Thank you, Brother Sohail, for that. I don't have anything further to say at this moment. So if anyone doesn't have anything further to say, I'm going to continue in the text. But, if something comes upon you and you want to bring us back or share a thought that's relevant to the discussion that we've had so far, feel free to. So let me continue with the text, inshallah. So he continues, it would be very lengthy to explain the sources of the all-wisest Quran's eloquence in its verses and words and sentences. Therefore, we shall keep the explanation brief and show by way of example the fluency and eloquence of the wording in one sentence obtained through the position of the letters, and a single flash of miraculousness that shines forth from that positioning. Take the verse, then after the distress he sent down on you, a feeling of peace and drowsiness which overcame a group of you. And this is from Surah Al-Imran. And it says to the end of the verse. I'm not sure what it means there, but the verse again is from Surah Al-Imran, chapter 3, verse 154. Then after the distress he sent down on you, a feeling of peace and drowsiness, which overcame a group of you. In this verse, all the letters of the alphabet are present. But see, although all the categories and emphatic letters are together, it has not spoiled the smoothness of style. Indeed, it has added a brilliance and harmonious, congruent, eloquent melody issuing from varied strings. Also note carefully the following flash of eloquence of the letters of the alphabet Alif and Ya, since they are the lightest and have been transposed with one another like sisters. They have each been repeated 21 times. And since Mim and Nun are sisters and have changed places, they have each been mentioned 33 times. And since Shin, Sad, and Sad are sisters in regard to articulation, quality, and sound, each has been mentioned 3 times. And although Ain and Ghain are sisters, since Ain is lighter, it is mentioned 6 times, while because Ghain is harsher, it is mentioned half as many, 3 times. And since Zai, Dal, Dha, and Ta are sisters in regard to articulation, quality, and sound, each is mentioned twice, while Lam and Elif are in the form of La have united, and Alif's share in the form of La is half that of Lam. Lam is mentioned 42 times, and as a half of it, alif 21 times. Since Hamza and Ha are sisters in regard to articulation, Hamza is mentioned 13 times, and being a degree lighter, Ha is mentioned 14 times, and Kaf, Fa, Qaf are sisters. I'm not even sure sometimes which, since it's transliterated, which letter it's talking about, like in terms of Kaf and Qaf. But since Qaf has an additional point, it is mentioned 10 times, Fa 9 times, Kaf 9 times, Ba 9 times, and Ta 12 times. Since Ta comes third, it is mentioned 12 times. Ra is Lam's sister, but according to their numerical value, Ra is 200 and Lam 30. So since it has risen 6 times more, it has fallen 6. Also, since Ra is repeated on pronunciation, it becomes emphatic and is only mentioned 6 times. And because Dad, Da, Ta, Ha, and Ha are emphatic and gain additional qualities in connection with other letters, they have each been mentioned only once. Since Waw is lighter than Ha and Hamza and heavier than Ya and Alif, it is mentioned 17 times, 4 times more than heavy Hamza, and 4 times less than light Alif. And let me just finish the paragraph. Thus, the extraordinary positioning of the letters in the passage mentioned here, and their hidden relationships, and the beautiful order and fine, subtle regularity and harmony show as clearly as twice 2 equals 4 that it would not be within the limits of human thought to have composed it. As for chance and coincidence, it is impossible that it should have interfered. And so, just as the strange and wonderful order and regularity in the position of these letters leads to a fluency and eloquence in the words, so may there be many other hidden instances of wisdom. Since such an order has been followed in the letters, surely in the words, sentences, and meanings, such a mysterious order, such a luminous harmony has been observed, and that should the eye see it, it would declare, MashaAllah, and should the reason comprehend it, it would exclaim, Barakallah. So I wasn't looking at the Arabic when I was reading this, but I think it would probably be useful to have the Arabic right next to you when you're kind of going through this, but I wish, the English here had put the actual letters instead of transliterated version of each letter, because it sometimes changes depending on which transliteration methods they're using, Anyways, so there's some, he's counting the number of times letters are mentioned, and I guess the relationship that certain letters have with other letters, and the category that certain letters are in versus the category that other letters are in. I mean, I'll be honest, again, I didn't necessarily look at the Arabic and see, but even if I did, I don't know how much I would understand it. I don't have any sort of expertise in, just the science of Arabic letters. But I guess what he's trying to highlight here is that there is a harmony, there's an order, there are hidden relationships being manifested, and that what's going on cannot be considered to be within the thought of human invention, I guess. And I think, the more you study, if someone is really studying the balagha and just the Arabic science of letters and language and rhetoric and linguistics, then obviously they'll be able to appreciate this on a much more profound level than I. So that's what I have to say. Let me go back real quick. Again, he's giving this as an example because, this is, he says, one of many examples. And as we saw, just this paragraph alone on just a single, it's not even the entirety of the verse, just maybe half the verse. There's quite a lot of explanation you can do on it. So that's what I have to say. I don't know if anyone wants to comment or make a connection with, you know, what we've been talking about earlier. Yeah. Brother Birkan, thank you. Please go ahead.
Selamünaleyküm. So yes, my the Arabic, which almost non-existent, also does not allow me, for now at least, maybe inshallah one day it will change, but for now it doesn't allow me completely comprehend what author is sharing with us. That's for sure. But the way I understand this text is that when you look at this phrase, when you look at this verse or part of the verse, you will see that its meaning, it's so strong, it will speak to you, but it will not speak to you just in any form. It will speak to you in a beautiful way. So whatever is given to us is beautified, author says. This is what I understand. It's like, you know, again, your mother prepare you something, and if she's in mood, if she's not having a bad time, she will do everything she can to make it beautiful, to make it look beautiful, right? Put some tiny things around it, put some, I don't know, spices in a certain way, so that when you look at it, it will be beautiful. And to be honest, for myself, I wouldn't say, oh, mothers, you just wasted your time. Who cares about how it looks like? I will just eat it. It doesn't work like this for me, at least. When I see something is beautiful, even before tasting it, it starts give me enjoyment. So author says these verses are beautified in a almost miraculousness way, that if you study, if you're willing to see it, then you will see it. So why he's talking about these details? Like he's probably aware that the most of the audience that's reading this text wouldn't be able to capture this beauty that much. It wouldn't be able to see the beauty. Sorry for that. Just give me a second, please.
No problem. So inshallah, Brother Birkan can come back to complete his thought. But yeah, you know, just even the example he was giving, you can bake a pie, and even if it may look ugly, but if it tastes good, you're like, okay, it tastes good. But if it's both beautiful, the aesthetic is there, and it looks like a gourmet dish, and it tastes really good, then there's a like enjoyment upon enjoyment, pleasure upon pleasure, you know. You'll be like, it's as if I've eaten it, or you know, in a sort of idiomatic fashion, you can say that not only is my stomach full, my eyes are full as well. I think that's more of a Turkish idiom, but so, and as Abdurrahman wrote, even if you search for meaning in the letters used, you will find meaning. Apparently it is loaded with that much meaning is the implication I'm getting. So there's meaning there for someone who's looking at it with that eye as well. Meaning upon levels and layers of meaning is what I'm understanding. Abdurrahman, please go ahead. And then Brother Bikram, whenever you're back, you can just jump right in.
Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to add a comment. So, like, honestly, when you were first reading this, I was just thinking, all right, I was impatient. I wanted the paragraph to end because it was almost even annoying just reading all this letters and numbers. I have real problems. We all have real problems. And talking about these numbers, what's it going to do? How is it going to help? But then I thought, even previously when we were discussing how it's so full with meaning, I sometimes I question it. I question it and say, really, is it really that full of meaning? Is every sentence, does it speak so well? I have such doubts. But when I read what Nursi wrote here, I see someone that was able to get meaning not just from the words and the sentences, but he's dug so deep that he's extracted meaning from how the letters associate with each other. And this is actually a very confidence inducing. It shows that someone was able to dig this deeply. And he says that I have dug this deep and I'm able to present that there is meaning here. I think that's his goal here, or at least that's what speaks to me here is I see someone that has been able to extract that meaning. If they've been able to extract it, then it means that, it's not empty. Unless I think he's a crazy man and he's just writing crazy things, which I don't believe that's true. I don't think he's just saying things just to say them. I think, these are things he's concluded and he truly finds these amazing himself, even if it's like gibberish to me. But I find that, okay, these people have truly found, meaning upon meaning, even in the letters and how they look to each other. So maybe I should dig further. It's like an invitation for me to also dig further. And maybe I'll also find meaning for myself in places that I have doubts if there's actually any meaning.
Brother Bikram, please jump in.
Sorry for the interruption before. So, yeah, that was a great example, actually. Like my daughter, she fell. She has a big head. So anyway, and she was hurt and she started crying. And her voice, her sound, there was a perfect harmony between the sound that she was, producing, the cry, and her mental state that she was in pain. There was a perfect harmony between the two. And this somehow, I think this is magic or miracle. Somehow this attracts my attention more. Knowing that she is sad, yes, would attract my attention. Just hearing a cry would attract my attention. But sometimes she cries for fun, even though she's not in pain or sad. And that time, sometimes I can even ignore. But when she's in pain, when she's sad and she's crying, this perfect harmony attracts my attention more. So, and again, why author is talking about such details, although most of the audience probably wouldn't be able to see, I think it's about the expectation. It's about what do you expect from word of God? What do you expect from speech of God? And there too, I, as a human being, expect a perfect harmony in terms of touching to my every aspect. as a human. I have my mind, I have my heart, I have my soul, I have my spirit, I have, everything that we can count, the list as a human being. And I expect that there will be a perfect harmony when the speech of God is addressed to me as a human. Seeing that the words or letters are used clumsily when I study them, if I see such a thing, it would raise a question in my mind. Would it be really, a speech of God? When I read it, if it doesn't fit to my reality, it's saying, the creator of the universe has such and such quality, but when I look at the universe, I don't see these qualities. If that was the case, again, that would raise some questions in my mind. I guess same goes with even the word choices, or even the letter choices, and even how many times these letters are used. It doesn't mean that I have to know all of these. I have to study all of these. But author says, if you study them, if you're willing to know them, they are there for you. No matter how deep you go, no matter how much you study, there's no end there. And to be honest, instead of using the word heavy, I would prefer personally the word richness there. I wouldn't say these verses are so heavy, as if, I just look at them and they just stay there. I cannot lift them. I wouldn't say that, because even if I'm just getting a tiny bit of it, as Brother Suhail said, when I was young, I was understanding something about the Surah Fatiha. Now I understand something different, probably more. So no matter who you are, no matter how you are in the current moment, there's always something that you can get, that you can understand. But again, no matter how you are and who you are, there is no end there. If you go more, you will get more. If you search more, you will get more. It will not end. You will never say, okay, that's it. I, covered the Surah Fatiha. Never. Even with the letters, forget about the meaning. Author says, even if you look at the letters, you will see something that gives pleasure to your humanity. Because as a human, you also have ears. Hearing this verse will also give pleasure to your ears as well. It will not finish there, of course. But the richness, depthness, maybe not heaviness, but the depthness, richness of the verse, I think it's important, because this is my expectation, because I am human, I am rich. I am deep. Every human being is so deep, so rich, that the God of speech, the creator of this human being, has to fulfill this depthness, even with the letters. Jazakallah.
Thank you very much, Brother Birkan. And on that note, inshallah, we can conclude today's discussion. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله